Check out carmarshal.com. The link is in the description. They help support us.
Turning schools into prisons with more cops is not a solution to shootings, it's a death blow to liberty. How do you convince a child who has been routinely handcuffed, shackled, tied down, locked up, and immobilized by school police that he has any rights at all, let alone the right to stand up to oppression? By the Free Thought Project, March 16, 2018. Rutherford Institute, just what we don't need: more gun-toting, taser-wielding cops in government-run schools that bear an uncomfortable resemblance to prisons. Microcosms of the police state, America's public schools already contain almost every aspect of the militarized, intolerant, senseless, over-criminalized, legalistic, surveillance-riddled, totalitarian landscape that plagues those of us on the outside. Now the Trump administration wants to double down on these totalitarian echo chambers. The Justice Department, headed by Attorney General Jeff Sessions, has announced that it will provide funding for schools that want to hire more resource officers. The White House has also hinted that it may repeal Rethink School Discipline policies, heralding a return to zero-tolerance policies that treat children like suspects and criminals, especially within the public schools. As for President Trump, he wants to harden the schools. What exactly does hardening the schools entail? More strident zero-tolerance policies, greater numbers of school cops, and all the trappings of a prison complex: unsurmountable fences, entrapment areas, no windows or trees, etc. Just when you thought this administration couldn't get any more tone-deaf about civil liberties, they prove once again that they have absolutely no regard for the Constitution, especially the Fourth Amendment, no concept of limited government, and no concern for the growing need to protect we the people against an overreaching, overbearing police state. America's schools today are already about as authoritarian as they come. Young people in America are now first in line to be searched, surveilled, spied on, threatened, tied up, locked down, treated like criminals for non-criminal behavior, tasered, and in some cases shot. Roped into the government's profit-driven campaign to keep the nation safe from drugs, weapons, and terrorism, many schools have transformed themselves into quasi-prisons, complete with surveillance cameras, metal detectors, police patrols, zero-tolerance policies, lockdowns, drug-sniffing dogs, strip searches, and active shooter drills. It used to be that if you talked back to a teacher, or played a prank on a classmate, or just failed to do your homework, you might find yourself in detention or doing an extra writing assignment after school. That is no longer the case. Nowadays, students are not only punished for minor transgressions such as playing cops and robbers on the playground, bringing Legos to school, or having a food fight, but the punishments have become far more severe, shifting from detention and visits to the principal's office into misdemeanor tickets, juvenile court, handcuffs, tasers, and even prison terms. These outrageous incidents are exactly what you'll see more of if the Trump administration gets its way. Increasing the number of cops in the schools only adds to the problem. Indeed, the growing presence of police in the nation's schools is resulting in greater police involvement in routine discipline matters that principals and parents used to address without involvement from law enforcement officers. Funded by the U.S. Department of Justice, these school resource officers have become de facto wardens in elementary, middle, and high schools, doling out their own brand of justice to the so-called criminals in their midst with the help of tasers, pepper spray, batons, and brute force. For instance, 16-year-old Alex Stone was directed by his teacher to do a creative writing assignment involving a series of fictional Facebook statuses. Alex wrote, "I killed my neighbor's pet dinosaur. I bought the gun to take care of the business." Despite the fact that dinosaurs are extinct, the status fabricated, and the South Carolina student was merely following orders, his teacher reported him to school administrators, who in turn called the police. What followed is PAR for the course in schools today. Students were locked down in their classrooms while armed police searched Alex's locker and book bag, handcuffed him, charged him with disorderly conduct disturbing the school, arrested him, detained him, and then he was suspended from school. Not even the younger, elementary school-aged kids are being spared these hardening tactics. Paradoxically, by the time you add in the lockdowns and active shooter drills, instead of making the schools safer, school officials have succeeded in creating an environment in which children are so traumatized that they suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, nightmares, anxiety, mistrust of adults in authority, as well as feelings of anger, depression, humiliation, despair, and delusion. Instead of raising up a generation of freedom fighters, which one would hope would be the objective of the schools, government officials seem determined to churn out newly minted citizens of the American police state who are being taught the hard way what it means to comply, fear, and march in lockstep with the government's dictates. So what's the answer, not only for the here and now, the children growing up in these quasi-prisons, but for the future of this country? How do you convince a child who has been routinely handcuffed, shackled, tied down, locked up, and immobilized by government officials all before he reaches the age of adulthood that he has any rights at all, let alone the right to challenge wrongdoing, resist oppression, and defend himself against injustice? Most of all, how do you persuade a fellow American that the government works for him when for most of his young life, he has been incarcerated in an institution that teaches young people to be obedient and compliant citizens who don't talk back, don't question, and don't challenge authority? As we've seen with other issues, any significant reforms will have to start locally and trickle upwards. For starters, parents need to be vocal, visible, and organized, and demand that school officials 1. Adopt a policy of positive reinforcement in dealing with behavior issues, 2. Minimize the presence in the schools of police officers and cease involving them in student discipline, and 3. Insist that all behavioral issues be addressed first and foremost with the child's parents, before any other disciplinary tactics are attempted. As I make clear in my book Battlefield America, The War on the American People, if you want a nation of criminals, treat the citizenry like criminals. If you want young people who grow up seeing themselves as prisoners, run the schools like prisons. If, on the other hand, you want to raise up a generation of freedom fighters, who will actually operate with justice, fairness, accountability, and equality towards each other and their government, then run the schools like freedom forums. Remove the metal detectors and surveillance cameras, reassign the cops elsewhere, and start treating our nation's young people like citizens of a republic and not inmates in a police state. About John W. Whitehead. Constitutional attorney and author John W. Whitehead is founder and president of the Rutherford Institute. His new book Battlefield America, The War on the American People, Select Books, 2015, is available online at www.amazon.com. Whitehead can be contacted at johnw@rutherford.org.
Does the government work for us, or do we work for the government? Tonight, what if the Constitution no longer applied? What if the whole purpose of the Constitution was to limit the government? What if Congress's enumerated powers in the Constitution no longer limited Congress, but were actually used as a justification to extend Congress's authority over every realm of human life? What if the president, meant to be an equal to Congress, has instead become a democratically elected, term-limited monarch? What if the president assumed that everything he did was legal just because he's the president? What if he could interrupt your regularly scheduled radio and TV programming for a special message from him? What if he could declare war on his own? What if he could read your emails and your texts without a search warrant? What if he could kill you without warning? What if Supreme Court justices no longer looked to the Constitution to determine the constitutionality of a law, but rather simply to what justices who preceded them thought about it? What if the rights and principles guaranteed in the Constitution have been so distorted in the past 200 years as to be unrecognizable by the founders? What if the 50 states were no longer sovereign entities, equals to each other, and parents of the federal government they voluntarily constituted? What if the states were mere provinces of a totally nationalized and fully centralized government? What if the Constitution was amended stealthily, not by constitutional amendments duly ratified by the states, but by the constant and persistent expansion of the federal government's role in our lives? What if the federal government decided if its own powers were proper and constitutional? What if the Constitution were no longer the supreme law of the land? What if you needed a license from the government to speak, to assemble, or to protest against the government? What if the government didn't like what you planned to say, and so it didn't give you the license? What if the right to keep and bear arms only applied to the government? What if posse comitatus, the federal law that prohibits our military from occupying our streets, were no longer in effect? What if the government considered the military an adequate dispenser of domestic law enforcement? What if cops looked and acted like troops and you couldn't distinguish the military from the police? What if you were not secure in your person, in your papers, and in your property? What if federal agents could write their own search warrants in defiance of the Constitution? What if the government could decide when you were and were not entitled to a jury trial? What if the government could take your property whenever it wanted? What if the government could continue prosecuting you until it got the verdict it wanted? What if the government could force you to testify against yourself simply by labeling you a domestic terrorist? What if the government could torture you until you said what the government wanted to hear? What if people running for president actually supported torture? What if the government tortured your children to get to you? What if government judges and government lawyers intimidated juries into convicting the innocent? What if the government could send you to your death and your innocence meant nothing so long as the government's procedures were followed? What if America's prison population, the largest in the world, was a cruel and unusual way for a country to be free? What if half the prison population never harmed anyone but themselves? What if the people had no rights except those the government chose to let them have? What if the states had no rights except to do as the federal government commanded? What if our elected officials didn't really live among us, but instead all had their hearts and homes in Washington, D.C.? What if the government could strip you of your rights because of where your mother was when you were born? What if the income tax was unconstitutional? What if the states were convinced to give up their representation in Congress? What if the government tried to ban you from using a substance in your body that is older than the government itself? What if voting didn't mean anything anymore because both political parties stand for big government? What if the government could write any law, regulate any behavior, and tax any event? The Constitution be damned. What if the government was the reason we don't have a Constitution anymore? What if you could love your country but hate what the government has done to it? What if sometimes to love your country you had to alter or abolish the government? What if Jefferson was right? What if that government is best which governs least? What if I'm right? What if the government is wrong? What if it is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong? What if it is better to perish fighting for freedom than to live as a slave? What if freedom's greatest hour of danger is now?
County. This is Charlotte County Cop Watch, and I wanted to explain what fair use is. You can use pieces of news articles if you're doing it for news reporting, you have commentary, and you're doing it for education purposes. So that's what fair use is, as you can see right here. Another reason why I wanted to make this video is to let you know I have just joined with Patreon. A nice thing with Patreon, I make no money on YouTube. They took the money away years ago, and so this is another way to give, and it's a nice thing too because you can give monthly. You can give $1, $5, $10, whatever. I do 4 to 5 hours a day on trying to wake the sheeple up on how corrupt it is and different ways that you can fight the corruption. So Patreon is a way that you can do it, and then of course the old way is still there. Donate to Charlotte County Cop Watch with PayPal or credit card. So keep that in mind. 4 to 5 hours a day. I make no money, but the corruption happened to me and I'm sick of it, so I'm trying to wake people up. But my wife would love it if some, you know, if we could get some help out there. There's 47,000 subscribers. Just think if each one of you subscribers just gave a, let's say, actually, yes, $1 a month. 47,000 subscribers gave $1 a month. That would be awesome. That's not going to happen. But anyways, that would be great if it did happen. But, you know, do the math in your head. Just think about it. Like I said, 4 to 5 hours a day. I get no money from YouTube. YouTube has gone nuts. You can't do anything anymore. They're taking the money away everywhere. So these are a couple different ways that you can still help out with all this time that I put in. And as you know, I'm in a special situation where, you know, at least I can do it. You know, 4 to 5 hours a day. We have a cleaning company during the day. That's what allows me to do this, and we're debt free. So this is my hobby. I don't go fishing and all that other crap. I try to save the world. So help me out to make the wife happy, man. In fact, if you guys did give $1 a day, and there was 47,000 of you, and you did it, and each of you gave $1, and that was every month, oh my God, yes, I could quit. I could start suing them. Another idea too that we have is, you know, if I got, you know, some funds, we could actually contact everyone that has been ticketed and or arrested and put in jail and start sending them postcards to let them know we're here, and to see if everything went all right, and if it didn't, find out their story. So we could even do more investigations and more lawsuits. Lawsuits take money. So just think about that. You know, 47,000 of you so far right now. You know, $1 a day. I mean, $1 a month on Patreon, or $5 a month Patreon, 10, 20, whatever. Just do the math in your head. Help out. This is a lot of work every single day. Thanks.